Thanks very much. So very excited to be up here and give Shashank an opportunity to present the company to you. You know, years ago, Mark Andreessen said, you know, software is going to eat the world. And if that's true, then I think Deskera is definitely eating Southeast Asia and India. So Shashank, CEO, founder, Deskera, do you want to talk a little bit about the founding of the business? You know, it's been a long journey. It's been 11 years since you founded the company and brought it to where it is today.
Yeah, thanks, David. My story is that I first came to Malaysia from India. Not many people know that. To start this business. I started this in India and then came over to sell my software. What we do is we have a software that runs every business process in a small or medium-sized enterprise, from financials to CRM, from payroll to project management. And it took us a long while to get the whole suite developed. But in Malaysia, we have customers like Bank Negara. I sold to Intel. And then about 20,000 more SMEs across the region. I think, you know, the way to look at us, you have to understand enterprise business, enterprise and SME software business. Every big geography globally has a native software business for SMEs. So if you look at US, they have QuickBooks, and then they have Oracle on the other side. You look at Europe, UK has Sage, Australia has MYOB, even India has Tally. When I see Southeast Asia, this is the only big geography that doesn't have a native software player for SMEs. But forget about SMEs, we don't even have a native software company for large companies. And we have a very healthy SME ecosystem, but we lack SME software. And I see us fulfilling that gap, fulfilling that need for SMEs. When they need software for accounting, when they need software for GST, when they need software for taxes, we want to fulfill that need.
And if you think about the size of the opportunity that's out there, so we saw on the previous presentation, there's about 100 million SMEs in Southeast Asia. And if you look at any of the geographies, between 40 and 70% of GDP is being driven by SMEs. About 2/3 of all employees work at SMEs, but adoption has been relatively slow. And so do you want to talk a little bit about how the ecosystem maybe has evolved over the last few years?
Oh yes. So in my experience, I wrote our accounting software. When you look at inventory, it's a very simple concept. But if you look at inventory and its the context with SME, its challenges. If you have 3 offices, there are 2 to about 3 ways of moving inventory. If you have 2 offices, there are 4 ways. But let's say you have 2 storefronts and you're a small SME, but you have 2 storefronts and you have 3 warehouses spread across Malaysia. I mean, this would be a very small company selling anywhere. Now you have 2 to about 5 ways of moving inventory. The challenge for an SME is that every time they move the inventory, they must record GST, even if they're moving inventory between their warehouses. So they must have a system that records out of GST in one and in of GST in other. And that creates 32 combinations. So every inventory you move, you have 32 ways to move that, 32 ways to pay GST or adjust GST. And you can't do that on pen and paper. You need a software. But when you look at software, you have options that will cost you millions of dollars. What cloud offers is a very inexpensive option. What we did right, I think, we did 3 things right, and we continue to do those things. One is that we have a very efficient software on cloud. And cloud offers a very, very, I wouldn't say cheap, but value for money option for SMEs to consume software, complex software. What we did right, the second thing that we did right was channels. So we work with channels, we work with thousands of partners and distributors in the region, and we let channels both sell and support the product. And the third thing, of course, that I see this region, I see a challenge with this region, especially Southeast Asia, and that's the reason why SMEs haven't bought software, is that software has to be very localized. It has to be in the local currency, it has to be in the local language, you must have local taxes built into it, and if you can't do this right natively, then they won't buy it.
And there's often with software, there's a lot of debate about platform solutions that are multifaceted versus individual point solutions. And so if you think about the SME, most SMEs, pretty small workforce, probably don't have an IT department, or if they do, maybe it's one person. Do you think that also plays into how they adopt software, where they're looking to have to train employees on multiple pieces of software versus just having a platform?
Well, yes, just having a platform solves a lot of problems. I'll give you an example. A simple business process like commission calculation. Now, every SME has salespeople, and you must give out some commission every month if they sell. If you're giving out commissions, you're looking at a CRM, you're looking at a payroll system, and you're looking at a ERP system to fulfill this process. A SME can't maintain 3 systems, so if it's done on a single platform, that obviously helps them.
And let's talk about the business a little bit. I mean, you've seen an enormous amount of scale. I think you're at about 400 employees today. What kind of growth are you experiencing? What are the pain points that you're facing from an operational perspective?
I think our biggest challenge would be regional talent. So when I look at KL, we are hiring here. We have an office right next door in KL Central. Our biggest challenge is getting the right people, getting them excited, and getting, B2B and enterprise is typically boring for entrepreneurs and young people. So getting them excited about B2B and software for SMEs is something that I see where, that's, I wouldn't call it a challenge, but that's an interesting take on the situation.
Yeah. And from a headcount perspective, you're at 400 today. Where do you think you'll be by the end of the year?
I think we'll easily get to probably 1,000 people.
1,000 people. And where do you think the software space is? Where do you think your business is in 5 years or a period of time?
I think enterprise is slow to take off, but enterprise is very sticky.
Yep.
Unlike B2C, which has its own challenges, but it needs a very high growth path, enterprise can sustain for a long term. So we're going to be around, we're going to be bigger, we're going to grow bigger every year, and we're going to be around. We've been around for a number of years, so yeah.
Yep. And you just recently launched in the Philippines. If you think about the markets that you're in today, what are you most excited about?
Southeast Asia offers a very interesting opportunity, and I think we all agree. I mean, this hall is full of entrepreneurs and business people looking at that opportunity. So it's very exciting to be in this part of the world. Southeast Asia is I was looking at a map of growth in the next 5-10 years, and I saw Southeast Asia, India, and of course China, part of that leading group. So I think this is an opportunity that in the next 5 years will pan out, and we look forward to that growth.
And a lot of software, the business model is based upon the number of seats that you need to buy, or you can cross-sell and upsell with additional modules. So a lot of times with software, you'll buy a certain number of seats in a certain use case, and then as you add modules, the cost of the software continues to increase. You've actually taken a different approach to pricing, and does that also fit into your channel go-to-market strategy?
Oh, yeah. We need to, that model won't work here. Primarily because SMEs have more employees, and that's a very American Western model. So if software companies have to perform and be successful, they have to evolve their business model. I mean, our business model is that you take the whole suite and use as many users and use as many features you want, and you pay a fixed fee. And you have to, as an entrepreneur, you have to make new models for this region. You can't just copy paste what you see in the West. For instance, we don't have credit cards. Business people don't use credit cards for their software. So if you're not using credit cards, how do you pay for SaaS software? So we solve this whole through channels and distributors and Ingram Micro. But these are challenges which are exciting, but every problem is unique. You can't just copy paste ideas from the West and expect them to work here.
And it's been difficult for startups to build digitally native brands and really establish a strong brand within whatever space they're operating. How have you thought about marketing and building the Deskera brand around the region, given that you're in multiple markets?
Yeah, I have my own belief on brand building. Again, as I said, we can't copy paste the American model of brand building. Asia is about it's more bottom up. So people in Asia can see CBS from a mile. So your brand has to be bottom up. Like if I ask you who is the CEO of Toyota, you wouldn't know the name. And I mean that's our culture. We don't do a lot of top-down activities. We are bottom-up builders. So my brand will take time, and that's okay. I've been here for a number of years. I'm in for the long haul. I think brand consumption is a function of how successful your software is with the user base and SMEs, and eventually, they will, once they use it, they will obviously have a higher brand recognition. But right now, I'm not solving for brand. I'm solving for software consumption. So if they can consume my software day in, day out, eventually I'll get the brand out.
Yeah, and I think the media and the trade tends to focus a lot on consumer-focused businesses. That if you think about iFlix, 19 million users over 3 years. There's a sexiness about consumer businesses, and I think a lot of times software doesn't get as much mention in the media. But I also was talking to a founder the other day, one of our founders, and he said that there appears to be this tipping point, which was undiscernible to them, and that there was a period of time where it was super challenging for them to raise money, and then all of a sudden everybody wanted to give them money, and he didn't know what actually changed in the business. And he said, we're the same team, we're doing the same thing, but now everybody wants to give us money. Do you think you've reached a tipping point in your business from a funding perspective?
That's happening to us now. So it's a very. I was telling my colleague, my head of finance, that enjoy this period, because we have had periods of drought. This is a period of rain, so enjoy this period. But as a software company, we have to see this in phases. So perhaps this is a good phase for us, and the next phase would be to go public and share the success with investors. But this is going to be a very long journey. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon.
And how many years were you bootstrapped? So how many years were you really?
10 years.
10 years. Yeah. So I think it's an amazing journey, and you look at the size and the scale you're at now. What's top of mind in terms of challenges for you? I think a lot of people will talk about talent in the region and accessing high-quality talent. If I think about your business, you've recently hired people from Apple or BCG, really high-quality firms. But what are some of the challenges that you're facing that you're thinking about?
Yeah, so the very first challenge I have when I get up in the morning is, and it's a good thing, which is I don't have anyone to follow. I'm building the first Deskera. I'm not building the second Uber or something that's been successful in the West. I'm building my first model, and that requires a lot of ingenuity. But you'll make mistakes. You'll have days when you made mistakes, and you have to learn through those mistakes. So you're basically charting a new course. You're walking a path that hasn't been walked, and that's a challenge when you're just you just walk and you have no idea what's lying ahead of you. As I said, the investor discussion that we are going through, and we're getting huge upside on value. And the only thing investors tell us is that we don't have any peers. We don't have any peers in the market that they can compare us with in Southeast Asia, in this region. So that's the exciting part, but that's also the challenging part.
Yeah. Well, I think you're looking at one of the next unicorns in Southeast Asia, for sure. And
thank you.
Another interesting dynamic is a lot of businesses in Southeast Asia are focused on regional expansion. So being in multiple markets, there's a strategic defensiveness that comes with that. You hit a largeable addressable market size, you can build a much larger business. The interesting thing that I've been seeing is that there's been some Indian companies that have been expanding outside of India. LiveSpace has now expanded, Book My Show has expanded, Ola is now in Australia. And you've taken a Southeast Asian business into India. Do you think there's more opportunity for Southeast Asian-based companies to be expanding into India?
Yeah, so we're running out of time, and this is something that is very personal to me. For Malaysians, for KL, I think as a business, we shouldn't see boundaries of geography as our boundaries. So if your business makes sense in India or your business makes sense in China, please go ahead. Go sooner than later. Don't constrict yourself with artificial boundaries, especially like Malaysia. My wife is Malaysian. I spend a lot of time here. What I would like to see more is this ability to go out. Is this not just ability, but just this willingness, this excitement to go out, and go to Indonesia, go to Philippines, and build a bigger business. Don't restrict yourself to a geography just because you have this mental block or just because somebody told you to. Get out of this place. So if it's India, if it's Vietnam, it's up to you. Up to you to chart your own course, but it's definitely not going to be just one country. And that's a good thing about this region.
Great. Everyone, thank you. Shashank.
Thank you, guys.